Welcome to another great episode of the Dre and Smiley podcast.
Dre, I am super stoked to have on our podcast today Andrea Doyle. Andrea is a champion community builder, social butterfly, dangerously soft-hearted creative who empathy is her superpower. Cat mom. As an influential player in the recreational cannabis scene since 2019, she has developed national sales operations and strategies, grown a vast cannabis community, and has continually provided outstanding customer service to various dispensaries throughout the state of Michigan and beyond. She is an experienced sales manager that continues to create long lasting relationships with cannabis operators and consumers nationwide. She has a deep understanding of the cannabis community and the women that are a part of it. She is currently committed to building a safe and comfortable consumption lounge for everyone, but especially for groups that the industry has marginalized. That's fascinating. Can you please, Andrea, tell us? I mean, 2019. I'm in Tampa, Florida, and cannabis. I see the dispensaries, the CBD shops. Please, just tell us about you and tell us how you got into the cannabis, and then tell us about the legal landscape of it, just as a generic opening.
Yeah, yeah, that is a big one. So I found like I've always had a love for cannabis since I was in like my 20s. And then I started using it for medicinal purposes, and I was like, oh my God, I have to get in this industry. It's changed my life. I want to help other people. So I basically was applying for every single job I could find. I got in as an executive assistant for a cannabis company that is a multi-state operator. So they were in Oregon, Michigan, and then I helped them open Massachusetts and Missouri. So all the laws there are kind of different and wild. Worked my way up through that. It became super corporate, which wasn't why I got into cannabis.
Mhm.
So I took a step out. I'm working for like a small craft grow now. I travel all over the state of Michigan just selling weed to dispensaries. But the legalities of it are crazy. Michigan is unlike any other market. We have, I want to say now over 800 dispensaries. We have a strong legacy market. So the rules are changing every single day.
One question before I turn it over to Andre is, can you define the gummies versus the weed versus the candies versus, is it all the same because of the THC content is what the deciding factor, or do you treat the actual weed part of it different than the candy part of it versus the edibles?
It is different. So I work for a company, we only sell flour. So we're growing that in-house. We put out about 300 pounds a month. We put that into pre-rolls and like pre-packed eighths. Um, in order to do gummies, you have to have an entire production line set up. And in the gummies is THC distillate. So you're not getting the pure THC, all the cannabinoids, all the terpenes that are in the actual flower. So
Mhm.
unless you're getting a live rosin gummy, those are actually infused with like a full spectrum of the cannabis plant. Where if you're getting just like the regular gummies on the shelf that are like $10, those are distillate. They're not going to have the same effects as flour would.
Mhm.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Mhm.
So, cannabis. So, Andrea, I have 101 questions.
Okay.
I'll try to prioritize them. So, growing up, the only thing I knew about was weed. You know, puff, puff, pass, all that,
Yep.
right? So, cannabis. What is cannabis? Let's start there. What is cannabis exactly?
Like as a plant or so
So
can
and the way it's yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm completely ignorant to it. Again, all I knew about was people selling bags of weed, smoking bags of weed, rolling bags of weed. Um,
hmm
is weed cannabis? So
Yes.
let's start there. As a plant, and then what does the what does the plant do for you? Let's start there.
Yeah. Yeah. So Cannabis is like the actual plant, the official name. You've got a couple different options right now on how to break it down. There's sativa, which is going to be more of an uplifting strain, hybrid, which is going to be a balanced strain right in the middle, and indica, which is going to be a heavier strain that will relax you, give you the munchies, that kind of stuff. Um,
Ah,
but there's like a deeper level to it scientifically. Um, I should pass you along my friend Elizabeth. They have certified ganjiers now. So, like a
wow.
sommelier, she can dissect the cannabis plant. She knows it from A to Z. Um,
Mm,
so it's wild all the science that is coming out.
hmm
Another big part of the cannabis plant is CBD is coming from that. CBG, CBN. There's a ton of cannabinoids, and each one of those has a very specific purpose. So
mm,
CBD can also help with like your inflammation.
hmm
CBN can help you go to sleep, certain things like that. And then there's another level that is the terpenes. So terpenes are found in every single plant.
hmm
So like limonene is found in lemons, but it's also found in the cannabis plant. And those
Okay.
certain terpenes will give you certain effects as well. So with the THC, all the other cannabinoids combined, and the terpenes, that's when you start to realize, okay, this cannabis plant is good for my endocannabinoid system. So it's not going to
Uh,
be the same for everybody. And I think that's just a plant medicine experience, like each their own. But that's the gist of it.
okay. Yeah, that helps quite a bit because
Okay.
again, I had no idea. I'm sure our listeners are a number of them are probably in the same place I'm in terms of what is cannabis. I've heard of all these different types of ways it's been consumed, gummies, brownies, smoking it, et cetera, et cetera. So let's get into that. So in terms of consumption of cannabis, right?
hmm
So there's what are the different ways it can be consumed? And then I have a follow-up question to that.
Yeah. Basic way is going to be flour. If you're going into a dispensary, you can buy it as a pre-roll, which is not going to be your freshest option. You can buy it in like a pre-packed bag, or you can buy it bulk. Um, that depends on your state laws and what state you're in.
Mhm,
There's cartridges if you're into smoking batteries and vapes.
mhm.
There's gummies, there's chocolates, there's infused popcorn, there's
Mm,
pretzels,
wow.
all the good snacks.
Mhm.
I had infused Cheez-Its last week. Um,
Wow.
there's tinctures, which are more of a concentrated form. There's RSO, that's super helpful for cancer patients.
Mhm,
Um, if you go into a dispensary, once again, depending on what state and where you're at in the process, you
mhm.
can find almost any way to consume. There's also
Okay,
my favorite way is concentrates, where they extract directly from the plant.
okay.
So if you'll see like wax, butters, they come in little containers and you
Mhm.
can dab those at like a higher temp. But that's more for the very experienced user.
Interesting. Yeah, this
Mhm.
this whole conversation, I have to admit, I feel like I'm in the era of prohibition. Everyone's like
Yes,
secretly in the back rooms
yes,
drinking alcohol, and we're now talking about the different types of alcohol, how easy it is to consume, etc. So,
yes,
so what area have you found? Because you've been in the industry for a while, it sounds like.
yeah.
What area is the most profitable? Is it growing? Is it selling? Is it, yeah.
That depends on how you're operating. So within the industry, there's kind of a small divide right now. So there's MSOs, which are the big corporate multi-state operators, and then you have your smaller legacy mom and pops, those who have been doing it since the legacy days and have finally transitioned over.
Okay.
Um, I've found that a lot of the bigger corporate ones, they can pump out a lot of cannabis, but it's not exactly quality. So it depends on how they sell that. Um, Everyone got into cannabis in Michigan like 5 years ago, thinking it was going to be a gold rush. We were selling bulk pounds at 4,000 a pound. Now we're selling
Wow.
them for 1,200 because the market
Wow.
got oversaturated and crashed. So
Mm,
if I personally, because I'm in dispos all day, I think the small mom and pop dispo shops are the ones killing it right now.
Hmm.
The customer service is winning out at the end.
Okay, and they're killing it primarily because of their customer service, or
Yeah,
is it
so
also because of the product? They
that
have a better
too.
product.
They have a better product usually. They have more connections from like the caregiver days. Um, they usually are more welcoming. The store feels more homey.
Mhm,
So when I'm in a mom and pop dispo, they know all their customers by name. They're coming in, you see the same ones over and over.
mhm,
Where if you're in a multi-state operator, the ones I've noticed, it's okay, I'm just here because you guys have the cheapest weed and I'll go to a different place tomorrow.
mhm.
Mm.
Interesting.
So it's the
So
long game.
the long game, okay.
Hmm.
And then my last follow-up, and I'll pass it back to Smiley here. So I was reading an article a few years ago where there was a large, um, there was a guy in New York City that
Hmm.
sold weed, um, on the West Coast, right? And he had a thriving business, right? Because it was illegal there. So he'd
Hmm.
sell it and he'd package it and send it over there. He was crushing it. It started to become legal. Everything was getting legalized. So his sales obviously plummeted.
Hmm.
So I don't know if you have a finger on the pulse of what's happening in the streets of Michigan, but is there a conflict that's taking place? And are there, I mean, it's hard to
Big
imagine.
time.
So talk to me about that. Talk to me about that. I mean,
Yeah.
what does that look like? Because, I can imagine a drug dealer saying, this isn't fair. Yeah, my profits are
It,
plummeting. But
yes.
talk to me about it. Talk to me about
It's
that.
very interesting. And it's awkward, honestly, for me. Like, I'm a white woman. The war on drugs did not affect me. It affected
Hmm.
a lot of other people, and now I'm
Hmm.
allowed to work in this. So that
Hmm.
is always the
Uh,
underlying tension, I think, is a big part of
mm,
it, which is
sure.
completely understandable.
Hmm.
Um, where was I going with that?
Well, you were saying there was layers. You're saying there's layers to the complexity
Okay,
of it
yes.
all. Yeah.
Um, so the legacy market has slowly kind of phased out because when states open, you always start as medical. People feel more comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm.
So even then, the legacy that are licensed caregivers are still doing a pretty decent living. And then as soon
Hmm.
as it goes rec and you have those dispos that can offer it at a much lower price and you can just drive down the road and get it,
Hmm.
that has started happening. So it is hard because the legacy people can't charge the same prices as the people that are backed by millionaires. So they're being pushed out and there's not much they can do about it. So there's just this underlying frustration between everyone here. And there's also the other side where the MSOs, these big guys, are like, well, you don't have professional experience. You can't run, you don't know, you don't have a CPA, you don't have a marketing department, you don't have this. So there's these kind of butting of heads where we need a little bit of both combined.
Sure.
Yeah.
When you mentioned Michigan, how every time I think of cannabis, everyone thinks of Colorado because I think they were the first. So
Hmm.
how are the other states? Is Michigan close to Colorado, or what's the difference between Michigan and Colorado? Like the
Yep.
Delta is like 1%, but then you look at some of these newer states like Florida, the Delta is 50%. So how are they varying per state?
So Michigan is, last time I checked, it was like number 2 or 3 behind California and Colorado for the amount of
Hmm.
sales that we do. So we have a very big cannabis community that's purchasing a lot.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that also comes from like we're kind of like a blue collar state. We're an agriculture state. So everyone here has been growing for so long. Um, and we're kind of seeing what happened in Denver happen in Michigan. So there's been markets crashing on the West Coast for a while now too, because it's the same pattern. Everyone's coming in, everyone thinks it's going to make them a ton of money. They crash the market, they move on to the next state.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's definitely interesting.
When you look at say a Florida, or let's say, I think that last time I checked on it, it's like 33 states support, or is it 27 or 33 states support medicinal cannabis. What do you think, say 2025, 2030 looks like? Do you see it federal at 2030? Or what trends are you seeing that says, because I think the way it was, I saw something on the news here and it said it's legal in Florida, but if you get caught with it in Georgia, it's not a legal state and you're going to jail. So
Yep.
there's a lot of things where Florida's like an island now because you can't get out of it with it in your car. But where do you see the trend of it's becoming federal and then every state can support it?
That's going to depend. So there's still a few states that, yeah, you can't even have medicinal on you. You'll go to jail for a joint.
Hmm.
And with certain states, like I know Wisconsin, they have a heavy alcohol market there. That is a huge revenue driver for them, and cannabis competes with that. So it's always going to come down to politics at that point because those are the people voting on the bills. Um, I realistically, if they could even just pass a like federal banking act, that would change everything. Like we don't need to go completely federal. I mean, I would love it to be legal everywhere, but
Hmm.
we can't even like take out small business loans. We can't do the normal things that other business owners do because it's federally illegal. So you can't claim certain things, like cash flow is always an issue. Um, so once that is in place, I feel like I know Biden has a bill in that's descheduling marijuana, and I think
Hmm.
that will also help push these other states. It's just a matter of politically how soon they will agree on doing it federally. And then once that happens, I see interstate commerce, I see big corporations, and also the little guys. It's kind of like the beer industry. You have craft beer and you have Bud Light.
Right. No, I like that. I smiled. I grew up in Appleton, Wisconsin, and
Mm-hmm.
I when I came out of school, my senior year, we were the largest drinking, consuming state that year. I graduated in '84, and we did not want to lose that title under our watch. So we drank so
Mm-hmm.
much to keep us at that number one position. And when you mentioned it now, I was like, that's exactly what Wisconsin is.
It
But
is.
it's interesting you mentioned the federal funding or the federal act because then you could do bank loans and commerce. Are you finding companies like I was at a trade show not long ago. I'm in the food business and I saw Kiva confectionaries. I
Mm-hmm.
saw what is it, Trees and Thunderdome and all these different cannabis. From your perspective, looking at it from a corporation or business aspect of it, what are some of the companies that are doing fantastic or up and coming companies that you say, man, that's going to be a big company soon as this occurs with the feds or this goes in Iowa or Wisconsin? Do you see any little companies like that that you say are up and coming?
Um, Not so much little for like
Or
nationwide, but Kiva is a big one.
Mhm.
Kiva is actually sponsoring one of my events coming up in August. They're like embedded in the community. They come from an actual like cooking background, so the chocolate's amazing.
Mhm.
It's consistent in every state that they're in. They will, I think, be around for a super long time. Same thing with if you're going to go the gummy route, wild gummies are extremely good. They're in multiple states and they're killing it in multiple states right now. Um, they also offer certain programs that a lot of cannabis companies don't offer. So they offer each dispensary a bin where people can come back and recycle their gummy packaging. Certain things like that that are going to differentiate them from everybody. I think those will be the big ones.
If one last question before I turn it to Dre, if there was one thing from your perspective as an insider and an expert, one thing that you could wave your magic wand towards and say, okay, if my industry had this, everything would be so much better. Is it the banking? Is it every state? Is it the regulatory? Because I understand there's no FDA in there because it's not federal. So the
Hmm.
regulatory, the standards, or what is that one silver bullet that would just take you to the next level for your industry that'll make it so everything else comes easier?
I think banking would definitely be number one.
Mhm.
And that's also just because that would give everyone more of a fair playing field. You have
Mhm.
people who've been growing cannabis for 30 years. It's an amazing product, but they don't have the money to even get into the industry
The
and they
scale.
can't take out the loan. So, yeah, they can't grow, they can't do all of those things. So that would be my ideal. Um, After that, it would be compliance for sure because our regulatory rules are crazy.
And how would you define compliance, meaning like the standards for the suppliers or the audit capabilities, the sanitation of the facilities? Well, could you just elaborate a little bit more on compliance?
Yeah. So every state once again is different, but like everything in Michigan, there's cameras everywhere, and we have the Cannabis Regulatory Agency. They can pull footage from those cameras at any time they want. They can request that. Um, their tracking grows. So plants are tagged from the very beginning all the way to the end so that people can't bring in different plants, different things. Um, they manage your waste. You have to make sure there's like a certain amount of marijuana waste combined with like kitty litter. Um, yeah, it's very interesting. And then they're
Yeah.
also,
It's like
Kitty
kitty litter.
litter.
yeah,
What?
yeah.
Yeah, that was
That's
random.
random.
Yeah.
It destroys it and makes it so no one can climb in your dumpster and smoke it. That is the basis behind
Oh,
that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So like
Okay.
your dumpsters have to be locked up. Obviously, there's like pages and pages and pages.
Mm.
Store wise, it's the same thing. Like every single product has a very specific SKU, tag number, everything is in a statewide system. Um, it's gonna show like this customer comes in, they're only allowed up to 2 ounces in one transaction. It won't automatically stop you. So if you sell over that, then expect to be visited by the regulatory agency. So
How
they're
will they
very
know?
um it depends. So with Michigan, you can make anonymous complaints. And so a lot of it is um, frustrated workers that are kind of coming out like some things are happening behind the scenes that aren't right because there still isn't a lot of oversight. We have a
mhm.
Okay.
ton of
Interesting.
rules, but not always a ton of oversight depending on what rule you're breaking.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Especially if that rule can negatively impact the bottom line. So I
Yeah.
imagine those are the rules that people are kind of turn a blind eye
Yes.
on, and it's okay if we sell 4 ounces instead of just two. Um,
Yep.
so 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 tell me this, Andrea. So um, currently your role is primarily in sales,
Mhm.
right? Walk me through a day in the life of you, the salesperson for cannabis. What does that entail? What are you responsible for? That sort of thing.
Yeah. So, my grow is up in the middle of the state, so I don't actually visit like the people that are up there growing. And when I say my grow, I work for the company. They're called Chronic Store Farms. Um, I basically, so if I start my week, I'm gonna go up and grab samples. So, um, I get some pre-rolls, some pre-packs. That is all legally done through our system. I have to put that in the system that I'm driving weed to this specific customer at this specific time. And then I drive all over the state just hitting up dispensaries. I meet with store managers to try and sell our product bulk to them that they then sell to their customers.
Mhm.
Um, I meet with corporate buyers if they're buying for 15 stores at once. And I'm basically just selling weed all day. That is literally my job is to drive around, sell weed, keep track of my relationships because relationship and community is huge in this industry.
I can
Um,
imagine.
yeah, and then I'm doing like pop-up events. So for one of my stores that buys from me, I'll swing in, I'll stay there for 3 hours. I'll talk to the general public about my product, help them move it off the shelf, so then they place another order with me.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and that's basically what I spend most of my time doing is driving and talking.
Okay. Yeah, you and Smiley are in similar fields, which is sales.
Yep.
So, being in sales, he's in sales also. So, being in sales, what's your biggest obstacle in this very unique industry? What's your biggest obstacle, and how do you overcome it?
We have a lot of competition because our licenses are unlimited. So there's only so much shelf space and there's a ton of product.
Mm.
Um, Luckily, we stand out, we differentiate ourselves, but it's still hard to push our product when you have other people offering the same product at a much, much lower price just because they can. Um, so working for a smaller grow, like the least amount I can charge you, that's like our bottom line. We can't make our bills unless you're paying that. But you
Mhm.
have a lot of retail stores that have a lot of power over you. So they're like, well, why would I buy it from you if I can get the same exact thing over here for cheaper and the end customer isn't that educated yet? So I could get not as great of a product, but it's half the price and it's going to make me money.
So,
Mhm.
how do you overcome that? How do you, because you have to keep your job too, right? So, how
Yeah,
do you
I
how do
do.
you overcome that?
um, I I think it's helped that I've been in the industry for so long. People know me
Mm,
and trust me.
mm,
As you can
relationships.
imagine, yeah, as you can imagine, not everyone is super organized.
Mm.
And a lot of our meetings, like, it's like, hey, do you want to come smoke? Like, that's our meeting. You want to try my product?
What?
Yeah. Yeah.
They'll
Dream
hire
job.
yeah,
It's a
yeah.
dream
Yeah.
Where do I
job.
sign up for that?
Right.
Yeah. How did I get that job?
I
Okay.
know. I never thought that that would be a thing, but that's a thing.
What?
Um, so
Oh
yeah,
man.
relationships, um, people knowing they can trust me. Like if I say a
Mhm.
product's going to be there on this day, it's going to be there on this day. There's a lot of companies that aren't quite organizationally there yet because they don't have that corporate experience.
Mhm.
So my corporate background coupled with the relationships I've built and my passion for weed, I think those three combined makes like a perfect sales rep because if one of those is missing with how intense this market is, it's going to be really hard to succeed.
Makes sense. I'll pass it over to Smiley here, but one follow-up question. So this is something me and Smiley talk about from time to time with one another and other guests. What's the next step for you? Like, so you're clearly it's something you're clearly passionate about. It seems like you really enjoy doing what you do, what you do, based on what you've shared here. What's the next step? Is it owning your own dispensary? Is it leaving the industry at some point? Yeah, what's next 5 years from now? What does that look like?
Got it. I don't think I could ever leave this industry. It would be very hard for me to go back to sitting in a cubicle.
And having to pay for weed.
Having to pay for weed, like I cannot imagine. I cannot. I save a lot of money
I
technically
bet,
working
I
in weed.
bet. Especially when you're doing sales calls.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Um, but yeah, next 5 years, I'm currently when I'm not working my day job, I'm working on opening the first female-owned consumption lounge in Michigan. So I have a business partner that's also been in the cannabis industry for quite some time. But we also have a strong background in event planning and hosting experiences. So our whole mission is we're going to open this kind of community and event space where we can have cannabis cooking classes, classes for women on how to get into cannabis for those that aren't quite sure about it. Um, Basically a community resource where you also be like you can smoke weed in there, or I can take work meetings in there. I don't have to smoke with buyers in my car. we have all these dispensaries and we have nowhere to smoke legally except alone at home on our couch.
Oh, wow.
So like there is a social community aspect that I think people are missing out on because I like smoking with my friends and
Yeah.
sometimes I can't do that at my house.
Hmm.
When you described that, what came to my mind is a cigar bar. So is
Yep,
it similar? Do you need a special license for that, like a liquor license or a weed license? And that's
yep,
exactly what it is, huh?
yep. And
Wow.
some states haven't even opted in for the consumption lounge yet. That's like I think too far for them right now.
Mhm.
We have two in Michigan. Um, they're not quite where like I would go with it. So we have like a whole location where the community would use it for sure. Um, and I think people are scared. Like the license fee for it is super small compared to a grow or a retail, but they don't see the dollar signs because it's not plant touching.
Right.
So it's been very hard for us to try and find like investors or people who believe in our mission because they're like, well, how are you going to make money? And it's like, well, we have a whole community calendar, we have classes, we have private events, we host dispensary days. Like, there are creative ways, and also it's not always about making $1 million.
Can you
And investors
sell?
don't like that. They
Not
don't
only
like the
that, not
investors.
only that.
Investors
No,
don't want to
no.
hear that.
They don't invest because it makes you feel good. No,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's not what investing is. Real quick, and I'll pass it back to Smiley. So if you had a lounge like that, could you sell in that lounge? You couldn't sell, could you?
No. So, but
Okay.
also we know rules change in cannabis every day. So at some
Mhm,
point, like California, you can have it with a cafe, with
mhm.
food, depending on how far along you are in the market. But we cannot sell actual THC product. We
Today.
can partner with neighboring dispensaries to deliver to us, or people are allowed to bring in their own.
Wow, that's clever. You know, I was driving down the street yesterday, literally last night, and I saw the doggy park, and it had the most dogs. And I'm in Tampa, and we got doggy parks everywhere, but you usually have one or three dogs. This thing had about 25 dogs over there. So I pull over, and this guy has a bar at the doggy park, and that's his theme. It was selling liquor,
That's
no
genius.
food. I was like, wow, I've never seen this. And everybody, and he stays open till 1 a.m. And I was talking
Wow.
to one of the guys. He's like, yeah, I come here all the time because I can sit and drink a beer, make some friends, and the dogs
Wow.
are making friends. And this dude is killing
What?
it with the doggy park with the bar there. I was like, why is there so many
Wow.
dogs over
Genius.
there? It's
Genius.
genius. So
Yeah.
when you mentioned your consumption line with the cafe, I was like, man, imagine if you had a doggy park with the consumption line. Now your
Yes.
dogs is there like Scooby Doo. You know, Scooby
Yes.
was he was on the Scooby snacks just like
Yes.
well, one thing I want to circle back to the business just a little bit. When you mentioned the growers and what is the infrastructure? Do you find that your cannabis, let's say your companies, when you go to the farms, are they paper? Are they systems? Are they spreadsheets? How do you keep track of all the rules and all of the tracking of the plant to the dispensary to the consumer? How is it automated?
It's a lot of spreadsheets, and certain systems. So there are a lot of tech companies that have come out that are trying to make cannabis more organized. So we do have like normal CRM systems. You can track what plant is going to which customer with the C of A.
Mm-hmm.
So everything can be tracked digitally. It just depends on which company you're working for. But I know in like 2019, we were all working out of 500 spreadsheets.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, there were
Man.
so many spreadsheets.
That's so if let's assume before Michigan went legal, was the farmer growing something else like berries or sugar grains or it's just a empty lot or he was the legacy and
A
then he
lot of
became
them, yeah, a lot of them are legacy.
okay.
Yep. And then even some of the more corporate companies, they will hire from the legacy market. because
Okay.
Oh,
growing is obviously a very special skill that not
mhm.
everyone has.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Especially with all the rules and regulations that are around tracking it and that sort of thing. You have to be committed and have the like you said, the skill to actually grow it. So tell me this, Andrea. So you've shared a lot. What's one thing that those listening and maybe others that know you don't know about you that you
Oh
wish they did?
God. I'm like an open book. People know probably too much about me. Um, I guess come off as like a really hard person sometimes. Like, oh, she's
Mm,
like a badass. She's out there selling weed.
yeah.
She's doing this, she's doing that.
Mm,
Um, but I get overwhelmed just like everybody else. I've had a crazy week and it's not always like fun selling weed. I get that a lot. That's
mm,
like, "Oh my
mm.
God, you must love your job. It must be so great." Yes, I do. Um, but it's also a lot of hard work. I'm not just like a stoner who smokes all day. So I think there's kind of a
Oh,
misconception for some of the people that don't quite understand the cannabis industry on that aspect. Like, what does she do all day? And I work really hard.
How hard could it be to sell weed?
yeah.
Well, it's
Exactly.
sales. Sales is sales, right?
Sales
No
is
Yeah.
matter what you're
sales is
selling.
sales and it's hard.
See, I thought you were going to say, because I've been looking at that cool guitar on your wall. I thought you were going to
Yeah.
say, I thought you were going to say you're a closet guitarist that live streams to Thailand and you got a
Right.
zillion followers.
Right.
No, I wish. Those are my husband.
Oh, all
Those are
right.
nice.
Those
Those are
are nice.
nice.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
we're going to move into the final four. And the final four is just so we can ask some generic questions that we usually ask to all of our guests. And the first one for you is alive or dead, if you could have dinner with any three or four people, alive or dead, at your dinner table, who would you want? You're in one chair and it could be other four or other five at your table. Who would you want and why?
Okay. I would want Dolly Parton because she's an icon and I
Yeah.
just love her. I think she's kind and would be really fun to eat dinner with. Um, I would choose Wiz Khalifa because I'd want to smoke with him. I would choose Lady Gaga. She's
Mhm.
interesting and I've been in love with her for years. And she also smokes weed. Um, I guess Dolly is gonna have to start.
Yeah.
She doesn't.
If she hasn't already.
Um, and then, oh, this is hard. One more. This is embarrassing, but probably Ariana from Vanderpump Rules. I don't know if you've been following the Vanderpump saga.
No.
It's a whole Bravo reality TV
Yeah,
thing,
I've heard
but
of it.
your
Yeah.
listeners will probably, some of them have got to know, but those are my
Okay.
those are my current ones.
Love it. Love
Awesome.
it. What's been your greatest success?
Um, I think I'm like working on it right now with my lounge. So
Mm,
when I left the corporate industry last year, it was on very bad terms. I had a really bad like mental breakdown. I was like, I
mm,
can't do this. And now it's exactly a year later, and I'm speaking on panels and I'm meeting with investors and I have people that want to help me and I built a website, just like all these little things that I've done over the past year by myself and then with the help of my business partner Sarah. I feel like just the past year of me growing and thinking back to where I was last year, like I am a success at this point.
Before I pass it to Smiley for the next question, I love that you shared that story because we've had a number of mental health professionals on to talk about the importance of self-care and and leaving those toxic environments. We had someone else on whose episode launched today, who her mission is to help women realize their self value, the self worth, right,
That's
and leave
huge.
those. Yeah, and leave those toxic environments. And once they do, it's like, the sky is open,
Yeah.
and the opportunities are limitless. So I'm glad you shared that
Yes.
story because it aligns with everything we've heard from many others. So go ahead, sorry.
Awesome.
Yeah, and you're the first one out of, I think we're up to 85 podcasts, and you're the first one who, I wouldn't say hijack the third question. I'll tell you what the third question is. We usually say, what is your superpower? What is
Mm,
something, and you in your description says, dangerously soft-hearted creative whose empathy is her superpower. So that means we have to course correct and come up with another question as to your superpower is your empathy. What would you say would be your biggest dream?
My
that's a
biggest
good one.
dream.
If money was no option, whether it's in the cannabis world or
Okay.
saving you, just money was no option. You got a genie that gave you $1 trillion. What would you do with it and why?
I think $1 trillion could probably house a lot of people. So I would
Mm,
probably do a bunch of, I'd probably build a bunch of homes with it. That would be like my biggest dream to like, because my empathy is my superpower, it can
mm,
also be my
Mhm.
kryptonite.
yeah,
Ah.
So it's
yeah.
very hard for me to walk around this planet sometimes and be like, there's people that don't have homes, there's people who can't eat. Like, how awesome would that be if we all had the same opportunities?
Mm,
Because I feel like sometimes half of my sadness is coming from other people.
mm.
That's fair. Thank
And
you.
if we were all just like happy, smoking weed together, had a place to live, had something to eat, like my life would be gold.
Awesome.
Love it, love it, love it. So let's say you were to write a book about your life. What would the title be?
I've thought about doing this because everyone I talk to is like, you need to write a book. People would read what it's like to work in cannabis. Um, Something along the lines of, oh, I don't know. It's got to be a strong title because I'm very strong. So I don't know,
Mhm.
like Boss Bitch or something crazy. There's probably already
I like it. I like it. I like it. I like it.
there's
Boss
probably
bitch.
already one of
I like
those,
it.
but
I like that.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
well, Andrea, we are so happy to have you on our podcast. Thanks for opening our eyes to the world of cannabis and just what you do. It's fascinating, it's intriguing, and it's in the news all the time. Everywhere I go, I see these new cannabis dispensaries. I don't know much about that space because in my youth, I was dealing with a lot of the legacy. But as I got a little older, I had to shy away from it. But thank you for turning that, exposing our audience to that, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, just to
yeah,
piggyback
thank
on that,
you.
Andrea, one of the benefits of having the podcast is meeting really interesting people from all sorts of different walks of life. Um, Cannabis is something that has been in the news for probably a decade now in terms of the controversy, that sort of thing, and what it all is. So thank you for coming on and helping to demystify some of it for us and bring some clarity and understanding. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right.